Money is such a difficult topic for the church to discuss. Whether you think that money is the root of all evil, or perhaps the more modern approach that money makes the world go around, it can't be denied that we're uncomfortable when the topic comes up, especially at church. And it's especially painful this time of year, when most churches and dioceses are in the midst of asking their members to give. None of us really likes to be confronted. As we look at today's gospel, I think that one of the reasons for this discomfort is placed in front of us. Money isn't really the subject. Money's not really important, at least not as the thing money is in economic theory. Money as a store of value is not what Jesus is talking about today. Instead, I would suggest to you that money is a means to an end. In today's gospel, money is a measure of control, a measure of power, a measure of status. And how similar that is to the reality we all live. When we talk about money in today's world, we often are simply talking about power and control. Who has the ability to influence or control the events of our lives? Who has the ability to make us miserable or make us excited? In the context of the church, how often has money been really the means by which we express our desire to control? I'm angry at the music program, so I reduce my pledge. I'm angry with the bishop, so I vote against the diocesan pledge. I really like the design of the new building, so I go out and increase my capital fund pledge.
Amen.
There you go. Now, none of those is really about money. All of those are really about power. They're really about control. So now let's go back and look again at some of the characters in today's lessons. Poor widows who take the risk to give their meager all, their very lives. As we look at these poor widows, it's important not to romanticize them. Poverty, starvation, are not pretty, and they're not romantic. It might help in terms of visualizing the widow in the Elijah story to call up the images of women starving in the various droughts around the world. Pull up one of those gaunt faces on your mental video screen. Imagine now a thin arm reaching down to hold the hand of her little boy. See the woman stooping to gather a few sticks of wood. They have a handful of meal and a bit of oil. They will eat it and wait to die because there's nothing else and no one else to care for them. As she slowly collects the sticks, a foreigner comes up to her, an Israelite. First, he interrupts her to ask for water. Well, at least they're still drinking water. She moves to get the water when he asks also for a bit of bread. She confesses she has nothing baked and very little left to bake anything with. He asks again that she share with him first and promises that his God will not let her supply of meal and oil run out until the drought is over. Now, imagine the woman in the gospel story. We don't know much about her, but we do know something about her society. It was about the furthest thing from a welfare state that we can imagine. There was no such thing as a social safety net for her to fall back on. When she contributed her last 2 coins, that was it. Unless she had an extended family or some other private resource, her contribution was a final and an irrevocable act. There are many like her in our own community. Perhaps she has children to care for. Perhaps she's alone in the world. She's not starving, but life is hard. She's down to her last 60 or 65 cents. Maybe she'll find work or someone will help her tomorrow, but maybe not. As she walks down the street, there's a bell ringer with a red kettle. She looks in her coin purse, 2 quarters, a dime, and 5 pennies. She holds that little change in her hand. As she goes with the crowd, she drops everything she has in the container. How can we understand her? How can we begin to apply this gospel to ourselves? It's disturbing when there's no formula to get us off the hook. A tithe? A tithe? The first widow must have given 30% of everything she had to Elijah. The second widow gave 100%. Like the Lord from today's psalm, the widows give food to those who hunger. Shouldn't there have been someone caring for them? Should not the followers of that God give justice to those who are oppressed? Who loves the righteous and cares for the stranger? Who sustains the orphan and widow but frustrates the way of the wicked? It's disturbing to think that both of these women are literally risking their lives to give. The focus of their concern, we think, must be survival, their own and their children's. And yet, they're the imitators of Christ. They lay down their lives for their friends. That's disturbing. That should be disturbing. And there's another side to this story as well. Many of us, most of us, I suspect, who hear the story in today's gospel, think that someone should talk to this widow. We think that someone should point out to her that, really, a couple of small coins don't make that much difference to the overall budget. And we really understand. We really do. There's a story along this line I want to share with you. I found it as I was researching this. It concerns a Baptist minister in a small congregation, and it's written from his perspective. Baptist minister says, "My deacon sent for me one day and told me that he wanted my help. We have in our congregation," he said, "a widow with 6 children. I've looked at the records and discovered that she's putting into the treasury of the church each month $4, a tithe of her income. Of course, she's unable to do this. We want you to go and talk to her and let her know that she needs to feel no obligation whatsoever and free her from the responsibility." I went and told her of the concern of the deacons. I told her as graciously and as supportively as I know how that she was relieved of the responsibility of giving. As I talked with her, the tears came to her eyes. "I want to tell you," she said, "that you are taking away from me the last thing that gives my life dignity and meaning." I tried to retrieve the situation, but I was unable to do it. I went home and pondered the story of Jesus in the temple, watching the people put their offerings in the collection plate. Jesus' attitude amazed me. He had the audacity to watch what people were putting in the collection plate. Not only did he have the audacity to watch, he had the audacity to comment. Of the rich who put in large sums, he said, they put in what they can easily afford. Of the poor widow who dropped in 2 coins, he said, she in her poverty, who needs so much, has given away everything, her whole living. I knew I would have said to her, let's take this to the council. We have a sensible council that always makes exceptions, and I know they will relieve you of your discipline of giving. The widow in that story understood that her giving made her a part of the community, and it was what allowed her to see herself as a full member without apology or diminishment. We also need to hear that message, since all too often we think that we know best how someone else should live their life. And again, notice that money here is not about the store of value. It's about prestige. It's about power. It's about control. The very things that Jesus cautioned against in the first part of the gospel account today. The question of money, whether in first century Judea or 21st century Illinois, is never really about just money. It is fundamentally about control and power. Who will be seen to be legitimately a part of the community? How will we decide what's important in our lives? How far can we trust God and trust each other? Those questions are what I think we're left with at the end of today's lessons. And I will simply invite you to take them with you as you leave here today.